We're Aaron and Dave Tashin, co-hosts of the Mindful Educators podcast, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now.
Shows on the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect others.
Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Welcome to another week of the High Tech Podcast. That's all I got to say. Welcome again.
We're back, folks.
Oh, no, there's only so many ways, folks. Each week I can bring you in and make you excited.
We could just do a script.
We could, but that would be absurd.
Actually, I listened to Brett Goldstein's Films to be Buried With podcast.
Okay.
And he does a little bit every week where he does introduce himself, and it's, I'm Brett Goldstein, actor, director, writer, and then he just starts getting weird, like gardener, mushroom eater, and, occasional sleeper. That. It's pretty funny. It's cute.
Well, that's fun.
But we can't just do what he does. That's not how this works.
No, we could. It's called stealing. It's totally okay. I don't know what you're talking about. It's fine. No, I know how our new intro should be. It should be something that no one's ever done before. You ready for this? Okay, come in, and then one of us just says, "In a galaxy far, far away." there once.
Sorry, I don't know. I shouldn't have done that.
Or our intro is just all horribly. Well, yeah. Now that you did that, our podcast is going to get silenced for copyright.
Great, Disney's gonna come for us now.
Disney is always watching.
Last week it was Pixar. This week it's Disney.
Yeah, they're gonna shut us down. No, like our intro could always be. Sorry, folks, just deal with us for a little bit while we work out our intro live with you. Our intro should always just be like stereotypical introductions to stories. So it could be like in a galaxy far, far away, once upon a time.
Yes.
Those are the only two I know. I need to work out some.
We're gonna
others,
need to find some more.
Yeah, I'm gonna need to find somebody and find some others.
Just open them in a haiku every week, a different haiku, yes. 757 bars. Yeah,
exactly. Ooh, a haiku intro. That'd be great. Just like a high tech podcast haiku every time. I'm feeling
high tech haiku.
A high tech haiku. I'm gonna put that on you though, because you feel like the person who should be good at haikus, not me. I'm gonna be honest.
Crap. My uncle sent me something this week. Never be first, never be last, and never volunteer. Well,
that's a good
volunteered.
Motto.
Yeah, right.
Anyway, welcome to the High Tech Podcast. This is Josh, Will. We're here. Welcome. We're back. There we go. We're super excited this week. We got a great episode. We are continuing the Robin S. Jeffers Learning Taxonomy series. But before we go any farther, just a reminder. We're online, not just in your podcast app, but we are in other places, on the socials, as the kids say these days.
No. On a social.
Hold on. I created an Instagram last week. I don't know if you know this. I'm just joking. I didn't.
So I was like, what?
Podcast Instagram. I do have an Instagram.
If you make it, you've got to run it. I ain't running it.
I gotta run it. I want to run it. We're on a social, as the kids would say. We are on Twitter at High Tech Podcast. Go check us out, subscribe, let us know you're alive, you're there. We want to engage with you. We post stuff, fun stuff.
Like us.
Things about our episodes,
Follow us, retweet us.
Yeah.
Please and thanks.
Yeah, it'd be great. You can also email us at I almost said index.
Ha! It's your turn.
It's my turn this week. Inbox at hightechpod.us. You can send either to the Twitter or to the email. To our email, a picture of the animal like we ask every week. I'm gonna be honest here, okay? I'm doing this off the cuff today. Okay? We've asked for a lot of animals. I feel like it's time to change.
Oh.
I feel like it might be time to change. What should we start asking people for? We clearly have planned carefully.
I mean, you could say we could go for like a Volkswagen Beetle on the beach,
like a car nature scene thing. To be honest, I'm not loving it.
Like a car on a canoe.
Like a car, like vehicles on other vehicles. Is that our go-to?
Vehicleception.
Vehicle-ception. Yeah, I don't know. We're gonna have to workshop this a bit more. I
just want some homegrown pictures of Groot this week. Okay, I am
Okay,
Groot.
that's fine. Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah. Give us a picture of Groot. If you don't know who Groot is, look up Groot. Okay, and then send us a picture of Groot.
I am Groot.
That's all I want. A fun picture of Groot. Okay? Send that over to inbox at hightechpod.us or at hightechpodcast on Twitter. Also, we have a website. You can check that out. We put lots of fun resources and things up there that go with our episodes at hightechpod.us. You can check that out there as well. That is our website. So there's our stuff. We are online
Tonight.
That is the thing.
Today, this morning, our episodes drop at 6 a.m.
That
when
is
you
not
are listening.
Good recording principles. I teach my SMEs the opposite. So in an undescript time that we are in at this moment,
in a galaxy far, far away, at a time,
it could
hence
be either
undisclosed,
day, night, evening, afternoon. It's a time. Yeah.
You are listening to this episode in which we will be hosting Robin S. Jeffers for the Robin S. Jeffers Learning Taxonomy series. We're very thrilled, but not just Robin. Like Josh said at the end of last week's episode, he queued you up. We are going to have Dr. Justin Harbin with us as well. The four of us are going to wrap up the RSJLTS by looking at Fink's Learning Taxonomy, and I couldn't be more excited.
Yeah, I'm super pumped. This episode is going to be definitely a nerd out episode, so prepare yourself. But it's gonna be awesome. I'm excited to dig into Finks with both of them. I feel like they need no other introduction. They've been on the podcast now multiple times.
Yeah,
they're seasoned high tech podcasters.
Seasoned like Cajun or maybe barbecue.
I mean, they're not quite Cajun yet. Cajun would, I don't know what the Cajun cutoff is, but I'm just gonna make it up right now. It's 12 episodes. It needs to be 12 episodes to be Cajun.
That's great.
We should create an entire seasoning.
Yeah, Robin and Justin, you need to get legs. Let's go. More episodes.
Yeah.
You need to get to Cajun status.
You gotta get to Cajun style. Anyway, super excited. They're joining us. Without further ado, let's just jump in. You don't need to listen to the two of us anymore. Let's listen to the four of us.
Okay, we are here with Robin S. Jeffers
in
our Learning Taxonomy series.
The Learning Taxonomy series.
Dr. Justin Harbin, thank you both for joining us this evening, this time that we are recording. Sorry, Josh.
Oh yeah, sorry. Nondescript time. Whatever time you're listening to this, that's when we're here. It's there.
He tries to coach me like he coaches his SMEs. Like, try not to say this morning or thank you for joining me today. Like this nondescript time whenever you happen to be listening to this. Robin, are you just thrilled to be a part of the series that is in your honor?
I am. It's kind of surprising every time you say it, which is a lot. I must say.
We do.
Often as we can.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure how that happened, but yes, I'm thrilled. Happy to pass on this legacy.
Justin was just one joke away from it being him, so
yeah, you got it on sooner. And really, in the High Tech Podcast, how do things happen? Will and I just go, this is an idea, we're going to do it, and then that's what happens.
Exactly.
Absolutely. All right, so this week, you know our folks, you know our panel. We're very excited. We don't usually interview more than one person. In fact, by usually never. Having the group tonight,
first panel, yay!
Will be fun. We are going to dig into the final learning taxonomy for the series, which is going to be Fink's significant learning outcomes. I am very excited for this episode to be the one pitching and not hitting. I don't know Finks. I had never heard of Finks until Robin's most recent episode with us. And even the app coming later on, I'd never heard of. So I'm going to get out of the way here. Jay, why don't you give us a little bit of your background with Finks, and then we'll go to Robin.
Sure. So I suppose I've known about Finks for, several years now, but have largely been a really big fan of it in the sense that, you guys are, I'm sure have talked about this a bit, but sometimes when we look at the traditional kind of Bloom setup or others, even the visualizations can create some problems for us. So when we see those pyramids, the red flags go up. I was just telling my students this morning, and I appreciate how Finks kind of goes out of its way to really help the reader understand that it is, we need multiple levels of learning interacting at once. And so literally this morning in my instructional design class for sophomores in our teacher ed program, where we talk lesson planning, writing objectives, all that good stuff, we were talking Finks. We also talked Bloom and Cratwall and Harrow and some others, but I was proposing.
Did you say Crapwall?
Cratwall.
I'm sorry.
I'm just gonna be honest. We've been doing a series on taxonomies, and I should have had a counter. It took Justin like 5 seconds to name 2 that we haven't even talked about.
I was wondering if you guys were going to mention that or just let that slide.
No, I couldn't get past Crapwall. Like I'm like, what a name, poor guy.
Oh, hey, we don't name him. Yeah. So, but I was framing Finks as a and Fink tells you this in his book, that significant learning experiences was meant in some senses he hoped to be a successor to Bloom's, and I think it's done that well, in my humble opinion.
Ooh, the humble opinion of Dr. Justin Harbin.
Oh God.
What about you, Robin? When did you first come into contact with it? What's your background?
We read Fink's book as a design team 3 years ago, 2 years ago, 2020 when I started.
Oh, that's like 20 years ago. We all accept that COVID time.
Ago.
Yeah.
Like 12 years.
When I came to our office and joined our design team, we read the book as the instructional designers. So that's when I first heard about it.
And have both of you had the chances to like apply this in courses still, or is it something you're starting to teach about, but you haven't necessarily designed a course this way?
I definitely think about it as I'm designing courses. I don't know, like we actively use webs in the office to design courses. So it's not the one that I go to automatically. But I definitely think about the principles from Finks, like when I'm teaching, like mostly my traditional undergrad courses that I teach on the side, rather than the office prepared ones.
Wait, an instructional designer teaches on the side and moonlights and contracts and
well, moonlights is like 8 a.m, but yeah. Well, I'm allowed to teach 2 classes a semester, so as an instructional designer, so
got it.
I take full advantage of that because I do miss the classroom. But, going from full-time classroom to no classroom is hard. But yeah.
Jay, have you gotten the chance to design a course with it from the get-go or incorporate it?
Yeah, in a few different ways. So I guess first in my role with the Center for Teaching and Learning, I've used it to create materials for our faculty. So I run our new faculty induction. It's going to be a year-long faculty learning community, and we've used it there as we talk about effective teaching and course design. We've used it. There was a digital workshop I created for our faculty where I took, at our school, we had this kind of academic vision statement. Like, what is our, beyond the mission statement, what does our education actually look like in practice? And so there's kind of a 3-tiered piece to it, or three spheres of focus, I should say. And I overlaid that on Finks and kind of unpacked that a bit to help interpret each other.
You took the snowflake that is the Finks diagram that I'm looking at, and you laid it on something else?
You should see the concept map.
Was that a kaleidoscope?
That was
created. Of course.
It was gorgeous. It was gorgeous and very
Wait,
complex.
You created a concept map? That's absurd.
No way.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
It's like the last thing you would do.
No, yeah, very foreign to me. So I've used it there through my capacity with faculty, but I also this summer redesigned our instructional design course, and this is a course that gets not just education students, but we'll have a few others. We have health and physical education. We have a couple school counseling students, intercultural studies, TESOL, because it's one of those like fundamental, what you need to know. Anything from teaching and learning philosophy to lesson planning and the like. And so literally today in class, we were unpacking it for the second time, actually. But I redesigned the course around this. So when students are thinking of goals or objectives, activities, as they write them, they're supposed to be mapping onto one or multiple of the, what do we call them? The snowflake pieces or the
petals?
different,
petals?
Yeah, the petals of the flower. I like that.
I think it looks like a flower.
Yeah, no, the graphic I'm looking at the moment is flower-like, flower-esque.
Yeah.
So no, I've been able to use it a fair amount, and I really, really enjoy it because it meshes so well with the other things I'm teaching the students about cognitive science, that the complexities in play, and so it just plays so nice with that. Whereas while Bloom and others work really well, even Webb's to an extent, there's pieces they leave out. I'm speaking of Bloom's cognitive. But or the framing of it can be misleading and direct us to certain places.
Well, they're easily measured. I mean, Webb's and Bloom's, like, it's easily, like, you can assign a number to things. So that's easy to do. Fink's is a little harder because the main idea is, like, significant change in the learner. So you can't easily measure that ever.
That's something that Josh and I have touched on in past episodes. Like, frankly, the other taxonomies are researchable. Like, they're very easy they're very good for research. You can look back on a course and say, did the students get to one thing I've just realized, though, we're jumping in, we're having fun already, but we haven't really discussed the taxonomy itself. We are all looking at a diagram. We're all pretty familiar.
Let's jump in. I think the way we'll do this is here's how I think we do this. Robin and Justin, I'm curious, what would be your elevator description, as I call it, of Fink? So you're stuck in a room with somebody for 1 minute, and you've got to describe the basics of Fink.
Justin's stuck in a room with somebody for 1 minute and talks to them for 5.
Yeah. Let's be honest.
I'm limiting you. It's fine. You can go into 5. Let's it's a long elevator.
I'm just joshing with you.
Oh, that just hurt a little bit. Don't do that. So I'd be curious how you guys would define it. I mean, we've talked about Finks a little bit before in the podcast when Robin was first on. But I think that would be kind of helpful just for those listening to this to think through just summary at base, kind of what is Finks. Kind of there. So let's Justin, you're the first one on my side screen, so I'm gonna start with you. Let's go there.
I'm honored to be there randomly. Yeah, so Finks has 6 dimensions. I'll just kind of work my way around the flower. But the first is foundational knowledge, and this is your basic ideas, facts, concepts. It's the raw material that you need to do other things, right? Application is the next dimension. It is going. I'm trying to move quickly here. Do you guys like how I'm going so far? I'm pretty proud of myself.
You just took up more seconds.
That's we paused the clock for that.
Oh, sure.
You left the elevator to go find another group to see. Look how good I'm doing right now, and then you walk back in.
Yeah, that's exactly what I did.
The elevator stopped on the floor. The doors opened. Justin stepped out for a second, said something, stepped back in. Door shut. Back up.
All right, here we go. Yeah, application is the second one, and that's where we're doing something. The student is doing something with that foundational knowledge. We're seeing transfer of learning to novel contexts, things like that. Integration is a really fascinating one to me, and I appreciate even the differentiation between application and integration. But integration is where we're seeing those connections to prior knowledge and to students' network of understanding, things they know elsewhere. We have the human dimension. This is where we're crossing into affective components as well, which is, again, why I love this framework. Human dimension is looking at what are the human impacts of the things I'm studying, both within and outside the classroom. A lot of different examples we could talk about, but we won't because we're trying to keep this to a minute. Caring is the next one. And what Fink meant here mostly was that there's again, a kind of a dispositional piece, but that students have a greater level of commitment and care to this thing you're talking about, this thing you're working through in the lesson than they did prior to your class. And the last is learning how to learn. And that's, again, learning what successful learners do, don't do, and so on. So that's the main framework and there's different ways each one of those gets expressed. So some of those are easier to measure. Others become a little more difficult.
And Robin, 60 seconds on the clock. No, I'm joking. I want you to take twice as long as Justin.
Yeah.
Well, that's not fair because he went through each one and said what it was. I would say that, I was like, what do you add to that? There aren't any more petals. But I would say that one of the most important things is the change in the learner. And I think Fink does a really good job of combining the cognitive and the affective pieces of student learning whereas like some of the other taxonomies do a really good job at doing them separately. Like Bloom has like 3 of them, but Fink does a really good job combining them. And he says that if there's no change, there's no learning. And that the significant learning equals lasting change. So I think that's where especially the affective pieces come in. Though they are harder to measure, they become more lasting and important for the student. So I think that's something that teachers can't ignore if they expect to have a good course and a good experience. He says the components of teaching, obviously knowledge of subject matter, design of instruction, the interactions between the student and the teacher. I think that's where the human dimension comes in. And then, of course, the management of the actual course that the student is going through. And then eventually, like that learning how to learn, the last piece is the one that, you know, elicits the lasting change in the student.
I think so as I look at it, I've got foundational knowledge, application, and integration on the right-hand pedals. And then I've got learning how to learn, caring, human dimension on the left-hand pedals. The right-hand side to me feels like the other taxonomies, feels like the cognitive approach to education that I'm so experienced in. The left-hand side feels like that, definitely the affective domain, but just the human element of learning that I don't think is captured in the other taxonomies. And just the very fact that human dimension is a category is one of those things that makes it like, it's like a light bulb moment for me. Like, how did I learn in those classes where the teacher sucked? Oh, because I was there. I was human. I was doing something. And then to the caring point, like there, you know what I mean? Like not all classes are good. Not all teachers are good. Not all students are good at learning, at teaching, at being a class, right? But there's still something that can make up for that cognitive side sometimes where you actually still experience significant learning as a result of the impact of maybe human dimension, caring, or, you know, the learning how to learn. I'll make jokes about the pedals. I mean, to me, it looks like a bunch of those wooden spoons from the ice cream cups we got as kids, just a bunch of those like folded on each other. But I think it is impactful that it gets to all these dimensions, and I really like it.
Yeah, I'll say from like somebody. Go ahead, Justin. Nope.
Go ahead. You're good.
Josh, go for it. Josh, go for it.
I'm gonna go. Okay, so I think the point that's just to talk about what Will's mentioning, like what I've seen from the outside. Will and I've been talking about a handful of taxonomies, although apparently there's more that we don't know. Justin does. But a lot of them, I think, our complaint has been. We really got into this on our last one. We were talking about Kirkpatrick, but like the kind of like robotiness to taxonomies, I guess I would describe it. Like kind of like the person is they've got these levels that they can pick up and they go through these steps. Yeah, these subjects, and they can learn. And what I find interesting about Finks is this part where it's kind of it looks more complex, and as you've mentioned, Robin, maybe a little bit harder to evaluate, but I maybe feel less critical of it because I look at like real life and go, well, humans are not as easy to evaluate as we think they are. And so it's kind of my perspective as being introduced to it, kind of looking at it, that I really like about it.
He has 5 elements of a good course is what he outlines in part of his book. And 2 of his elements they have to do with the interaction between the teacher and student. So one is that the teacher cares, first of all, first and foremost, about the students and the subject. And I think this is kind of where higher ed gets a bad rap too, because, well, my mom was a high school teacher and she always said elementary school teachers were weird because we care so much about the students. Because you kind of care less and less as students get older.
100%.
What?
I endorse that statement.
In kindergarten, that's what I taught most of my career. And yes, I did care much more about the student than I did the content that I was teaching. But one of Fink's elements of a good course is that the teacher cares about the student first and foremost, and then the subject and the like active teaching and learning, like what's going on. And then the other one is interacting with all the students. So that's, the affective pieces. But Also, I mean, obviously he puts in having a good system of feedback and grading and assessment and, the active forms of learning and significant kinds of learning. But I felt it interesting that, you have to care a little
Yeah,
to
it goes
have a
both ways.
significant learning change.
Mm.
And I think we've all probably felt that in our classes too. Like, I mean, that we've gone through, what teachers care and what teachers don't. So,
Yeah.
Robin, you mentioned that one of the conversations I was having today with my students about human dimensions beyond. So in my context, and probably in a lot of teacher ed programs, I don't necessarily have to convince them you should love the kids, you should care about them as they're preparing to be kindergarten teachers or whatever it is, right? But we were also talking about curriculum, how this causes us to think about curriculum in different ways. And I always think of this example from a professor at Calvin University, David Smith, and he teaches German language. And all of his textbooks, there were like these stock photos of like the standard German person in lederhosen, and like,
all German people wear leaders.
right?
You mean implicit racism?
Yeah, I might say that. And Oktoberfest, excitement aside, he references this, like, what's the human impact of this curriculum? What kind of story is it selling to my students that Cengage or Wiley or whoever put this thing together? Just name some names, but the generic, but like thinking about what are the human impacts of even this, and is it telling me a full story, a full picture of the human impact of when we talk about, I don't know, business and economics and education, of course. But man, there's so many things like that can touch different parts of our direct curriculum or explicit curriculum, but as well as other components of as well. The learning environment, null curriculum, hidden curriculum, all that. So.
Yeah.
Well, and that's where there's something to be said for like travel learns that are so impactful and that students never forget because of how much of themselves physically is a part of the learning experience. I did a travel learn in 2009. We did 4 countries, 19 days. I can't say I remember everything about the trip, but there are so many more aha moment memories from that trip than even my vacation to honey, don't hate me for this, than even my honeymoon, right? Like at my honeymoon, what did we do for the week? Guys, I shouldn't have, but I did.
Guys, it's okay. It's okay. She doesn't listen to the podcast.
Doesn't.
She'll never
hear
this.
this.
She'll never know.
She'll never know. Like
Brutal.
I'll put this in a good. I'll try now to dig myself out of this hole and put this in a good light. In our honeymoon, we relaxed. We ate food. We went. We got on a sailboat. That stands out to me. A great memory, right? But like, it was just a chill week. And then, listener, Justin is currently pantomiming the act of digging. Yes. I am digging.
It's so deep.
Oh gosh.
Compared against my travel learn, where I went on the top of the Eiffel Tower, I went in the Louvre, I went to a concentration camp, right? These things and the emotional impact on my life stand out. I just want to erase the last 10 minutes of this podcast.
Well, you're the editor. You can, I suppose.
I could. It would be so hard. So hard. No, it's not happening. I own this. I love you, baby. If you ever listen to this, that's a good joke. So,
well, and like, okay, so Will, here, let me dig you out for a second. I think what you're getting at, though, is like all of those things had a part where they were tied to learning and had a purpose of showing some of what's talking about here, human dimension, getting you to care about the topic you're dealing with. The whole point I think we're talking about is I was trying to dig you out, but it's not working. I don't think.
No, I agree with where you're going. Like the emotional impact of things like a concentration camp on me and even the other learners. I was on that trip with 44 strangers, 44 high school people who, in my general estimation of them, were not generally estimated to be great. It was a tough trip, and they were having a party and they were having a great time, and they were all, it wasn't kind of my shtick. I was there to learn. I was very interested in everything. And yet at that concentration camp, you could hear a pin drop every single one of those students was impacted by that experience, and they began to care in a way that about the Louvre and the Eiffel they didn't. And that's, to me, a demonstration of like what I was even saying before. The left half of the pedals really stand out to me as powerful and actually some of my favorite parts of learning, while everything I've been taught about learning, even my undergrad and master's, would probably lean towards that cognitive side, the foundational knowledge, the application, the integration. It's beautiful. I think this is a good thing. And we are finally past the giggles.
Yeah, he actually mentions powerful forms of active learning. So it's funny that you do mention those things. That the richer learning experiences encompass more of those pedals, like more than one of the pedals are involved in a rich learning experience. And talking about novel ways for students to learn the material, beyond just the watch this video, answer these questions, read this chapter, answer more questions.
Are you talking about online education?
Not at all. Oh.
Shots fired.
But yeah, like, and especially, I think you guys were talking in past episodes recently about reflecting and how we don't do it enough. And that learning how to learn piece is really crucial in the reflection process as well, because that's where you get that.
Robin, I appreciate that, because earlier you mentioned the idea that Fink talks about this change. It's part of why I really gravitate towards this, because it opens up your thinking about the learning process itself, whether it's learning how to learn or even integration. Like, so, I mean, I think foundational knowledge, application, like we can kind of map those onto Bloom's or something pretty easily. But integration talks about a process. It's about an incorporation into a schema and a network of understanding that I think is really useful for learners and for teachers. Oh, and actually, just an example of that, I just remembered something I did. An online course I designed, or was an SME on. We have a weekly reflection piece, and this is a doctoral level course, but I wanted them to reflect on their change throughout the course. So I've got a picture of the flower, and I want them to pick one dimension each week where they're reflecting, here's how I sensed a level of change, even though in a week it's going to be small, but I had them kind of reflect on that. And so that's one design component. If steal that, use it. But I haven't taught it yet, so we'll see how that goes.
The irony of that practice is that it really maps to something that I think is good in Kirkpatrick's. Kirkpatrick's is 4 levels, very simple. The first one of them, the word is of course going to elude me now, is about getting their reaction. I think it's reactions. And it's about when we're doing the training, when we're doing the learning, making sure that there's a post-session survey. They call a smile sheet. They want to get that reaction from people. And like one of the things that I think about in the context of training and how I've done that in the past is like you might have lunch and learns all semester. You may have one every other week or something like that. Each one's going to be a different training session. I want to see those smile sheets, every single one of those, not because I need to necessarily know what happened that day. Very helpful. But at the end of the semester, I can look back across all of those and say, were the folks generally satisfied, generally impacted? How could we improve the overall program, the overall level? And that's where I would relate that to here to say, what can we be doing to connect with those students more frequently about their caring and their human dimension? A smile sheet is a little benign, but like smiley, neutral, or sad face, right? Like just something simple could be really great over time, so that not only are your students getting to see that of themselves, but you're getting that connection point. Josh was talking about, maybe doing that with his course coming up soon, not necessarily a smile sheet.
Yeah, I suggested with some kind of, I didn't want to call it a smile sheet because I hate that term with a passion. But
maybe you just need to smile more, buddy.
But yeah, I mean, well, maybe. Apparently I'm not happy enough. I need to be happier. But just getting a vibe on how the students are feeling, how they're doing within the midst of this, and like finding, kind of having them reflect on their own progression, kind of what you're talking about, Justin, what you're doing, like trying to at a different level get them to reflect on, okay, how are they changing in one of these areas? Like how are they starting to kind of also process their own learning, for both them to kind of understand it, think through it, and also for us to see how to get a read on how they're actually learning as well. I think that helps us as the person teaching get a better feel on where they're at. are we actually seeing progression in them or not based on how they're responding to these questions? Could be helpful.
He actually outlines some factors of change too.
Ooh.
So there's 5 different factors of change. One is the willingness to think and reflect critically that we've been talking about. And the other is a willingness to search for new ideas. Okay. Then using the new ideas faithfully and responsibly, then adapting those new ideas to new situations, and then persisting. I guess it seems to me cyclical, so it could go over and over and over with any new concept.
Right. Oh, I like that.
Yeah, that's interesting. The progression of it.
Those factors though reinforce for me the snowflakiness of this. Not to say that in a negative way. Like there's so many layers to this. Is like an onion. Onions have layers. There's the 6 petals, and there's significant learning in the middle. Then there's elements. Then there's factors. Like this dude loaded his taxonomy with info.
That's the beauty, though. I think it defies easy measurements as as a proper understanding of human learning. Is which I love that. And like Robin, you said that the critical reflection piece. Josh, you talked about it. Oh, it is just so important for our students and ourselves. I've been trying some things on my exit tickets really intentionally to up my game in that area. So just the other week, I asked them, "What's one thing you need from me to be successful?" And you kind of would expect. Really, yeah. You would almost expect, my freshmen, my sophomores to ask for the easy A. Jokingly, we might say, okay, they're going to, haha. But no, they were sincere responses, affirming very specifically things I'd done that helped them, or saying, hey, I wish you'd do this a little bit more. Like the next lesson, I was able to put some of those things in place. So like,
wow.
My students always surprise me in good ways, mostly, but helping them think critically about what's their process. And I get the advantage of teaching teacher ed, where you can kind of break the third wall often and be like, guys, why do you think I did what I just did? You kind of and I wouldn't necessarily get to do that in other disciplines, but so it's kind of cheating, but yeah.
Oh,
so
hey,
I really
you're
enjoyed that.
You're doing. I would call that socio-metacognition, right? You're trying to show them how you've thought about thinking to learn to think.
Yeah.
Did that make sense? I think that worked.
I'm with you. Yeah.
Thinkception.
Leonardo DiCaprio understood it. You're fine.
But did it stop spinning? I just need to know.
Oh, that's a question for a different podcast. Yeah. So one thing I want to dig into and just ask you real quick too is whenever we've talked about Finks before, there's a lot of conversation too about how all of these interconnect with each other a little bit more than other taxonomies. How do you guys kind of understand that in Finks and maybe try to work it out in what you guys are doing?
I think along with those factors of change, like there are multiple things happening when a student is changing based on learning. So like probably when they're using new ideas consistently, they are also integrating. They are also applying what they're learning. They are also, if they're doing those things willingly, then they're caring about what they're learning. If it fails in one setting and then succeeds in another, then they're figuring out that how to learn piece. So yeah, the graphic does, it's kind of like a Venn diagram on steroids because all of the things intersect in the middle. And I just think with any kind of learning change, if they're consistently doing it and willingly doing it, then they're using all of them anyway together. It's hard to pull them apart.
Yeah, that's I would almost push back if you were just looking at, say, some pyramid with Bloom's kind of taxonomy. Like, just because you say you're just
hypothetically.
Yeah, hypothetically. And I really like Bloom's. Bloom's is fantastic. But it if I think I'm just doing one, I don't quite understand how learning works. Even on those, right? So yeah, if I'm like I've worked with faculty before and like, oh well, this is a grad class. We just do critical thinking here. I'm like, well, what are you doing that with? Like, what? You need some raw material to be putting around with.
What are you critically thinking on?
Yeah. Do you ever lecture for basic facts? You do.
That's kind of, one of the reasons this whole series came to be was because somebody criticized the fact that our office was not, we were not allowing for the highest levels of Bloom's taxonomy because we wouldn't go to the create level.
Oh no.
Yeah, so we were just resting on our laurels on apply, and I hate to split hairs here, but like, in order to create, you have to apply what you've learned, and you can apply something by creating. It's not that you can't create, like, we're not killers of dreams, but
Careful, for you tread on my dreams.
Sometimes we are killers of dreams, but
we usually just leave that up to Josh.
Yes. Yes,
my
all
job.
the external tool dreams. But I think even in Bloom's or Web's or any of them with like the levels, if you're going for a higher level, you're probably using all the other lower levels. So, I mean, while it's hierarchical like that, yes, but I don't know. I feel like the circular diagram is a lot more friendly.
The irony is we assume it's hierarchical because that's how we see it visualized, but practically the point is practically it is circular. It is happening together. You can't create without first recalling. You can't synthesize without first recalling. You can't apply without creating. Like there's a relational nature a relational nature to those things that
and I've seen webs in a circle, and I've seen webs in a block, square blocks.
But that's the piece, though, right? Like, as an educational developer, I always you think about this thing that's going to get translated, it's going to get mediated to the viewer, and like especially in higher ed, I would say more so than K-12 even. Bloom's has been used for things that would make Bloom blush, probably. Like the idea of like he designed this thing to reflect many of the things we're talking about, but when you get into like, oh well, I just do critical thinking, it's not picking your favorite fruit off the thing at the grocery store. This is there's more, you have pick some and not others necessarily, but the idea is when you list it or when you just hand it to someone who doesn't really have other ways of interpreting that information, they often will run with it in ways that context. So working with teachers to understand, hey, like here's actually how you should use this, not just memorize this list and take out your cheat sheet. I have the old classic cardboard wheel.
Yes.
You can spin around I have it for Bloom's and Webs, and you can pick your verbs,
make
and
sure that it's aligned,
right? You got to make sure. And I personally, I still use those things often just because if I'm like brainstorming, writing objectives or outcomes, it just helps me think in different ways about what the kinds of things I want to see and hear my students doing. So, but I think the context around it really matters. You can't just say, here, do Bloom's, do create, because it's intuitive enough. You say, I want to see who wouldn't want to see their students create.
Right. It's not a bad thing.
No, it's just there's so much more context that has to go behind it and around it.
Here's my hot take on this for a second, because this is coming up out of just like bringing together some of the stuff that Will and I have been talking about for the last couple of weeks now on taxonomies, because Will and I keep coming back to the fact that like in each episode so far we've talked about like positives and some negatives, and I feel like the negatives we come back to on most of them are just like we don't like graphs and being told what to do, but like I think in seriousness, I think when it comes to taxonomies or anything that we try to do with this, we as humans like boxes to put things in. And I think I'm more and more coming to the conclusion that like as we talk about learning and we talk about the way that we learn, if I feel like I can put what I'm being given easily into sectioned boxes, we should actually be more uncomfortable with what we're looking at than an area like, I would argue, probably Fink's. You read it at first hand, you go, I'm not quite sure what to do with this.
Where do I start?
And that uncomfortable feeling should actually be something we're looking for when we're talking about learning, because learning is more complicated.
Beautiful.
And so like looking at it that way, I think that's my hot take. I like that hot take. I feel like I've come away with something.
Listener, I am golf clapping over here.
I'd tweet that.
Oh, snap.
Good.
Oh no, that's Will's job. I just repeat whatever I just retweet whatever we do in High Tech Podcast.
I'd fire that off in the
And
Twitterverse.
occasionally like bird memes. So
Well, this is beautiful. Unfortunately, we are not only looking at the clock, but against Justin's battery this evening. So
yeah, we don't know where he's at right now. What are you at?
We're looking at 30%, so you know
we're down 25% since he started.
Yeah, but that's where 30 is where it gets dangerous. That's when your computer's like, I'm not quite sure how to calculate this.
Well, it's just like
30 and then 10.
It's just like E in your gas tank. You know, E in your gas tank. You know you got 20 miles, but do you? I like.
Yeah,
it is. I like risking it sometimes, but yeah, well, yeah.
Any closing thought from each of you, Robin and or Justin, something that you want to like, how it's just stood out to you or been impacted you, or how you want to be maybe even thinking about it moving forward. I'm just trying to scatter shot you here so you have a little time to think while I babble, and then I will hand it off to Justin to start.
One could say pitch, you know, why he pitches.
Oh! Swing, bada.
Yeah, so again, you guys are helping me to think about this in some different ways, which is really useful. Definitely going to go right back to my class on Thursday and share some of this. I'll just point into the podcast.
Yeah, make this a required listening.
Required, yeah.
Crap.
No, please don't do that.
Oh no.
Maybe let's dial that back.
I would feel.
The first lesson for your students is when you're talking about your honeymoon in retrospect, do not do what I did.
Yeah, if Justin's class you ended up listening to this, that's bad marriage principle. Don't do that. That's a takeaway.
I'm trying to help you guys. trying to help you. Yeah. So no, I think so. We kind of rounded up talking about this idea of how we want students to see this thing as a change event, and so we're seeking change over time, whether it's dispositions, understanding, what have you. And there's also this interpretive element with any of these frameworks, with webs, with any of the others we could name. So one of the things that's become really compelling to me, for working with especially early teacher educators, but also with our faculty, is that this invites that element. It invites you in. It's a little more intuitive in terms of welcoming you into the ambiguity is not the word I want to use, but the complexity, I guess, the complexity of measuring learning. And that some things will be easier than others to measure, right? Foundational knowledge, we got some pretty straightforward ways of doing that, but human dimension, how do I assess that? I mean, that's kind of tricky.
Yeah.
Again, Kratwall can help us with that, perhaps, and the affective taxonomy. But anyway, so I really do think what's been compelling to me over Finks over the years, and why I've been convinced, even I still love webs, and that was like my main jam. But Finks has won me over. Maybe it's human dimension. I don't know. Caring. Some things are happening. But I've really been compelled because it invites that conversation, both for your learners and for the teacher. And that to me becomes a really powerful tool that does something else that I don't see in some of the other taxonomies or frameworks.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Robin?
I think it has a lot to do with the change piece, and I think it has a lot to do with the interaction piece, because we can't learn in a vacuum. We can't exist in a vacuum. I think we need, other learners around us and other people around us to interact. And when that interaction becomes significant learning and change takes place, then the human dimension is fully flourishing. And we can have a bunch of techniques that we use as teachers. But when we can put them together and make them purposeful and meaningful for our students, then it's strategic, it's purposeful, and it means a lot for them to be learning. So
it's a moment where the design, the intention, the cognitive side of it has that fruit on their life, on their impact, on their human dimension.
And it happens in community. I think that's a huge piece of it.
Oh yeah. Love me some community learning.
There we go.
Love it. I love that so much. I'm just such a fan of it. I'm a big fan.
Nailed it. Transition.
I'm also a fan
idea.
of it. You know what I'm a fan of? School.
Oh. Oh, she doubled down. She beat me to it. Well done. Well done. Golf clap.
There we
Golf
go.
clap. As always, we prompt our participants, interviewees,
People?
friends,
Somebody involved in the podcast. Nailed it.
to bring an app with them. And this week, Robin brought us Fan.school. That's the name, right?
Fan.school, yes. Quite similar to FanDuel. So sports betting. No, I'm serious. Like, I'm pretty sure that's where they got it.
Gosh.
Was
Because
that a
it's
joke?
not. It's not. No, it's super cool. You're gonna love it. I actually learned of this through my daughter's teacher, her social studies teacher, who is a really cool guy. But so he set up this, and so I don't know if it works with other subjects. So he's a history, like social studies teacher, and he set up this activity where his kids are supposed to learn about current events. Okay, so it has to do with world news. And it's basically a fantasy current events league. Yeah, I know, right? So I'm in a fantasy soccer league and I love it. And so the minute I heard about this, when he sent all the parents an email saying, hey, your kids are doing this at school, here's a parent league that I set up just for our kids' parents. Here, pick your countries. So the thing is, you pick your country, like you have a bank of so much money, I guess, and you pick your countries based on who you think is going to appear in the news most often.
Oh.
So the countries are ranked. Like the US is really close to the top. Russia is really close to the top in cost, and also because they are in the news a lot. So you pick your countries based on who you think is going to be in the news, and then you get your points that way. So it's like a fantasy current events. So FanSchool. I don't,
That's
like I said, I have
amazing.
no idea if this works for other subjects, but I think it's really cool for, middle school, high school social studies teachers. I could picture a college social studies, like humanities.
I mean, the health and physical ed folks are almost always doing like their own fantasy leagues, actually, too. So why not?
Yeah. I mean, it's not like there's no money bet on it or anything. It's just some friendly competition between these 8th grade parents. Like, I can look at my list and be like, oh, I know that person. Like, I know their kid,
This just sounds like a social studies prof somewhere with a comp sci degree, computer science, decided like, oh, FanDuel.
Yeah. FanSchool.
What if I made my students do this and I gave them a grade for it?
Yeah.
I would love to hear the pitch meeting for that.
Right.
I was super proud of my daughter because she picked Qatar as one of her countries, and I was like, why did you do that? And she goes, well, aren't you guys always like talking about the World Cup all the time? And I'm like, yes, I'm so proud of you right now.
Wow. When you've trained them up in righteousness.
Yes, I know.
Yeah.
It's like they're going to be all over the news in a month.
I think even beyond, I think even beyond the novelty of that, though, what I'm hearing is, as a former high school history teacher, I'm a big fan of this because I used to do current events a ton. But there's a predictive element, which I think is so useful. As you move from unit to unit in social studies, the conversation is like, well, okay, we know this to be true. We've had these general principles from, hey, we talked about the Roman Empire. We talked about immigration. What are these principles that we can then extract out of this era that may be true across? They were kind of timeless principles. And how can we use that to maybe prediction's a strong word, but like get some insight into what the world is doing and where it might be headed in some ways. Like you want to get them to think like historians. And so I think there's some powerful things that taps into at its best. At its worst, I'd be really curious to see what happens. But at its best, I think it's good.
So suddenly like back alley, like betting rings from the students. So I wonder how many times the president of the school is going to say this week. Like they start just like betting on everything.
Turns into a whole
Last time I was in 8th place.
I'm
not sure what I'm in right now.
Ruh-roh.
Gotta up your game.
Well, I'm in like
Yeah, you gotta
4
step it up.
millionth place in the Premier League fantasy league, so it's better than that.
Would you pick
true.
Wrexham? Oh wait, they're not in the Premier League. Hello.
No, they're not.
Got a few years with that still.
Oh, sports. Yeah, so I would just say on a quick look, it does look like it's kind of general news based.
Yeah.
So it looks like it might actually work outside of just like social studies and history.
Mm.
I would love to tell us more, but their website appears to be
Yeah,
down, so we'll see how
my
that-
server can't reach it. at
I
the
was
moment,
trying
so-
to ignore that and hoping
Yeah.
just to ignore it for the moment, but hopefully by the time this
Sorry.
episode's up, by whenever it is, that the website's back up.
Listen, it happens.
true.
Okay, so that doesn't mean it's a bad. Means it's a bad app. It sounds really cool. I think it's worth checking
Yeah.
out.
I love
and,
that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that with us. Thank you, Robin and Justin. Thank you, Josh, for coming as well. Thank you, Will, for
Yeah,
giving us all
well,
a great
like I said,
laugh.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. You know,
Make sure.
So
Yes, thank you. It was fun as usual.
Clearly, we tell you
Yeah.
we will invite you back, and it happened. So
It does.
yeah,
we're true to our word.
Guys, I've thought deeply. I've laughed till my face hurt. It's been a good podcast episode.
Bingo.
Yeah.
And how much we got left? Where are we at? 22%?
So 23%. Good guess.
Oh, wow.
wow.
So she's kind of. It's just
Wow.
we're dropping right down here.
You
we're
should
gonna-
bet on FanDuel.
We need a fan school for battery power.
Sun's going down. Sun's getting real low. Deep comment. All right. Well, in a moment here, Josh and I will wrap the episode, but thank you both so much, and we hope to have you back soon enough. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Well, what a wellspring of knowledge between Robin and Justin. One of our longer episodes recently,
Yeah.
and all for the best reasons.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I love having both of them on. It was, I'd say, successful first panel. Anybody who debates me about that being a panel is wrong.
Hey,
and,
you had a moment coming out of it where you're like, that was stressful, but just
yeah,
saying.
well, it is. I mean, just only the two of us. Where really, if you get 4 people in there, then you're like, talk words. Anyway, it was a great topic. I feel like I learned a lot more about Finks even though I knew, because like as Robin had mentioned, like the design team on Robin and I's team read it, but I'm not a part of the design team, so I was saddened by myself without a Finks book.
I himself. After getting their insights though on that one taxonomy, I'm kind of like, well, dang, I wish I had them for the rest of the
Yeah.
text.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, that's only because it took Justin 5 seconds to mention taxonomies we haven't even talked about during the series.
Yeah, and what did he
Um,
mention 10 of them, 15?
I don't know. He's a
25 other ones.
Such as it's Anyway, but I'm
Love you,
glad
Jay.
I'm a
You're
little
amazing.
I'm a little biased towards Finks now, I think. So I'm glad I brought them on for Finks. That we brought him on for Finks. I don't know. I'll be honest. I've known about Finks. I've heard about it through the design team. I've gotten graphics from Justin at certain points or whatever, and looked into it a bit. I know the more and more I think about it, the more after our conversation with the two of them that I think about it, the more and more I'm like, okay, I dig this. Like I could see how this is. I think I still come back to what I said during the episode, which is like that if I could summarize anything thinking through this taxonomy series we've done, it's like if it's too easy to put learning into boxes out of it, then I'm maybe
It's
more
gonna be less
skeptical
effective.
now. Like maybe it's less effective. Like maybe the advantage of Finks is that it's not easy to put things into boxes.
Yeah.
And maybe better represents the complexity of learning. I still don't think perfectly. I think there's stuff that it doesn't do well that others do, or that they all don't quite get because
Well, and some of the other ones are just like more focused. That's totally fine,
Yeah.
right? Like they're really like webs, depth of knowledge. Right? Was it 4 levels? I think like that is a really focused approach to
Yeah.
measuring, quantifying learning. One of the things that stood out to me that was light bulb moment, should have realized this sooner. Just looking at it, like there's kind of a half and half. Like I said in the episode again, cognitive versus affective or kind of human centric.
yeah.
I didn't notice that before. You just kind of look at it. It's like, oh, look at all these petals, look at all these leaves, whatever it is, whatever you want to call the shapes that are coming out of the main centerpiece of it. But if you kind of, as we walked through it, like half of them are cognitive, half of them are affective. And I think that the power in that is you can use those cognitive ones to do the qualitative assessment. Excuse me. What I meant to say is the quantitative assessment. You can start to try and measure things more
Yeah.
on the cognitive side, but you still have that qualitative side that respects the humans and
Yeah.
leaves space for motivation, which is mucky and miry. Like you
Yeah.
can't measure
But
motivation.
at least it gives like a title to it a little bit. Like, okay, this motivation spans everything, but it does give a little bit of like a focused way you can lean into some motivation, which is, I was
Sure.
thinking about this the other day, which is like like how you get students to either care about how this impacts them or other people, or like it gives a little bit, I would say, more weight to what you're learning. Because this is not just some sterilized topic in a classroom, but actually like matters for some
Yeah.
reason, whether or not it's going to matter, whether they're learning math and they're not going to be an accountant one day, but you can get them to care about the fact that like this is going to help them better understand how to, do life situations, or like how math is tied to people who get really psyched about math, get psyched about the ideas. I'm saying people because I'm not one, but get psyched about the idea
those
of like
other
how,
folks
like,
out there.
yeah, like how math is everywhere. I mean, it's literally like parts of our world function
Yeah.
on math. Like getting students excited about more than just learn this because I'm telling you to learn it, but learn it because this does actually impact your everyday, or impacts the world, or impacts people, or like getting them to kind of start to care more about the topic than just about what they're learning.
Yeah, I love that about Finks. I love that even about our conversation, how we pulled that out. And you like Justin's almost a demonstration that Finks is so important. He's got so much cognitive knowledge about education broadly,
Nah, that's ridiculous.
and he loves it. Like he probably has so much knowledge because he loves it, but he loves it because he has so much knowledge. Like I don't know. Like I see that as a really great demonstration. And Robin, of course, has been in the industry for so long, education, saying that, and moved from like, pre-K and kids age up here to higher education, probably done other stuff in between. I don't know her whole history, but like it's amazing that folks like this that dig in and love education, stay in it for a lifetime, if you will, make a career out of it, will show that they have that cognitive knowledge and the love for it. And so what we can see for education nerds, that's going to be easy, but like activating that in a student who wants to learn math, or activating that in a student who wants to learn engineering, having them and finding for them what it is to get all the cognitive stuff about their subject matter and get them engaged, loving it, motivated. So I love it. It's beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. I really like it too. And like thinking through just this seems to be the part, I think that's the part of the flower that we liked the most. I mean, I like all the other parts as well of it, but like the cognitive side of it, as we've talked about, is like, okay, like I can see it in other taxonomies. I kind of like how Fink breaks it up a little bit, the way he does it. But at the same time, it's like, okay, most of the other taxonomies, they all have something in those components to a certain extent, right?
Right.
Like, so I think what gets us most excited about things is that other side, the human component of it. And like I was just thinking about the other day, that part of that, like carrying the human element, is also just like it's raising the stakes for people. It's created like tying it more to things. So like if you want to work through philosophical questions, instead of just giving generic philosophical questions, make it real for them. Like if you're going to ask them, I don't know, I'm at a loss tonight for philosophical questions right now, but if we're gonna ask
what is real,
what is real? If we're gonna ask them something like, are all people generally good natured or bad natured, right, or something like that, right? You're gonna ask them that general philosophical question and give you an 5 pages on a philosophical question, or you can tie it to like this, your younger sibling, 2 years old, do you think they're generally good natured or bad natured, or like so like you could tie it and get them to care more about the topic by actually tying it to people, tying it to things. It's not manipulating them, it's just making it more real. Like at the end of the day, we care about that question because of people.
It's kind of ethical manipulation.
Yeah, well, whatever.
It's ethical. It's fine.
Yeah, it's ethical manipulation. But it's not manipulation. At the end of the day, philosophical questions, the reason we deal with those questions is because of those scenarios. So let's
Right.
stop generating them as generic questions and actually tie them to the real world. The real reason
Absolutely.
humanity cares about those questions or the existence of where we came from is not just because we like arguing. It's because we're looking for meaning in this world, right? So
Some
like,
of us,
tie
it's
it to
both.
those real. Well, yeah, okay. So you got some of them, but anyway. So that part, and I also like the just like continuing to learn part, right? Like trying to figure
Yeah.
out how to help them continue to learn the topic or the situation, or identifying that the course is not the end all of the topic, that you need to be able to get them to a point that they better understand the topic, that they're meeting the outcomes. But at the end of the day, every course's outcome should also be by the end of this course they can better learn in general and learn this thing, whatever your source material is.
Yeah.
Right. So.
All right. Well, folks, we've probably, I don't even know, taken you to an hour and 15 at this point. Thank you for sticking around. Next episode 77. We're pretty stoked for this question. We're going to be digging into whether or not every lesson needs to have an assessment.
Yeah.
Right? Do they? Does every lesson, anything that someone's going to do in a learning experience, should it be assessed?
Yeah.
Hot topic. We'll see if that's going to be fun or not.
Or not.
And then
people might just be like, I know the answer to that already.
and we're actually going to be doing. Yeah, I already know, and I'm just going to skip the episode. We're going to be digging into 2 honorable mention apps next week. So they're smaller and easier to use, pretty straightforward, but they're accessibility focused. We're really excited about these. So the one is Free Online OCR, which will have a link and everything like that we'll talk about next week and put in our episode page. And then on Twitter, there's something called the Image Alt Bot that we want to highlight and make sure folks know to use when they're working to be more accessible. As always, find us on Twitter at High Tech Podcast. Make sure to like us, subscribe, hang out, send us messages. Love that. Check us out at inbox at hightechpod.us if you have requests for interviews, want to get on the podcast with us, want to take us to task for something we said to today's episode. And finally, find all of our episode pages at hightechpod.us, where you can like everything we've got and share it. All the website pages that Josh makes for us. Thanks again for joining us for another week as we continue to learn what it looks like to harness technology in the classroom, whether it be online or in person. Until next time, see ya.
See ya.